I woke up soaking, my bedroom flooded. My wife was screaming next to me, and I splashed through my waterlogged sheets to sit upright. My daughter was screaming in the other room, and I got out of bed and waded through the thick mire that had become of our home. Water was pouring in through the 6-year-old girl's bedroom window. I was shocked and confused. Was someone outside our house with a hose? This was no flood. I struggled through the rapid water to pick my daughter up on my shoulders. The great swell of a gush pushed me out of my daughter's room and back into the hallway where I bumped into my wife. "We have to get out of here," she told me, seeming to have calmed down a bit. I couldn't articulate my thoughts. We were swept down the hall towards the front door of the house. I passed our daughter to my wife and struggled to open the front door. There was great pressure behind it, and water poured in through the crack at the top. My wife held onto the door of the kitchen as a new current flooded into the house. The water level was up to my neck. I had to get the door open now or never. I anchored my right hand on the inside of the door frame and then pushed with my left as hard as I could. We were completely submerged as it opened, and I helped my wife and daughter through the opening. They swam up and onto the roof where I joined them. And from there, I could finally see what was going on. Our whole property was flooded. No, the entire suburban street. In fact, as far as the eye could see, even buildings of the downtown core, glistening in the distance, were partway submerged in a blanket of choppy water. It was as though a great lake or shallow ocean had appeared from nothing. A cacophony of screams, shouting, and splashing could be heard in the air from all corners of the city. "What's going on?" Jessica murmured under her breath. "We're sinking," my 5-year-old daughter, Emma, piped up. Sinking, I thought to myself. Why did that feel correct? We were thousands of kilometers away from the nearest ocean. It couldn't possibly have been a tsunami. If I made myself very still and focused, I did think I could feel the sensation of sinking, but maybe that was in my head. "Do you know if any help is on the way?" one of my neighbors called from another rooftop. "I have no idea," I called back, looking around the neighborhood to see several neighbors out on their rooftops. "We're still sinking," Emma called up to me. My heart skipped a beat. Sure enough, the water level on the roof was higher up than it had been just 5 minutes ago. Where was this water coming from? It was moving rapidly over the city, but its currents were hard to track with the eye. It could only have come from the ocean, but what freak event had led to the ocean coming this far inland? The only thing I could think was that some massive asteroid had blown up the moon or something. But when I looked for it in the sky, it was sitting right there. "Jamie, we really are sinking." My wife Jessica tapped me on the shoulder. "We need to find some higher ground." She pointed to some of the taller trees, poking up from what had been our backyard. I picked my daughter up and placed her atop our chimney, and stood with Jessica on the highest point of the roof. I wanted to avoid swimming if I could. I thought it was best to conserve energy. We didn't know how long we'd be here. When the water reached Jessica's neck, we took our daughter and headed for the trees, and we shared the branches of a tree with our neighbors next door. But it didn't stop there, as in no time even the tops of the trees were submerged. Emma wrapped her little arms around my neck as my wife and I treaded water. It was surreal looking down onto my flooded property. It didn't feel like my house underwater. It looked like some snow globe replica that was made to scale. Our worried faces lit up as down through the waterway came one of our neighbors in a small yacht. The boat was being driven by Gordon, the only one I knew by name, and we thankfully climbed aboard with our next-door neighbors. There had been dozens of people treading water alongside us, all up what would have been the street, but from the boat deck now I could see they were no more. Vanished. Perhaps they didn't have the strength to tread, or even to scream. Even the 9 of us on the small yacht who survived didn't make much conversation. We were all too sullen, too in shock, all rudely awakened in the middle of the night to leave all our lives behind. All our former possessions sat at the bottom of the ocean. And now, day was finally breaking as we made our way to the buildings downtown, their tops still managing to poke up through the water. but by the time we got to them, they had sunk below the ocean's surface as well. A number of other small boats joined us, having had the same thoughts as we. One man among them claimed to be a geologist. He told us that something unprecedented had happened to the tectonic plates. They didn't shift, they all just crumbled at once. They hadn't been able to work out how. But now, with nothing to support them, all the continents were just sinking into the ocean. A steady and pervasive feeling of doom crept into all our hearts as we heard. The ocean was deeper than the tallest mountain was tall by a long shot, and anything that didn't float would eventually sink. As daylight burned away overhead, we all stared over the edge of the boat to watch the last light reflected up from the depths of the sunken city, finally swallowed by the murk of the deep. Every last beautiful sparkle off the windows of buildings, every last garden twinkling in the watery glaze, they were all gone, deep to the point that light could not reach them. And as evening fell, an ominous storm was brewing in the western sky. Golden twinkling rays illuminated the monstrous bank of cloud. The wind and the waves picked up, and a heavy rain descended upon our boat. Most of the other boats had drifted away from us, but 2 remained in proximity. There was something unusual about this rain. It left our skin sticky and shimmering in a rainbow hue. Mixed into it was some sort of strange oil, and panic struck anew when we realized it was melting the boat, dissolving the fiberglass. Emma and Jessica were huddled up together in tears as I tried to bail out the boat, but it was futile. I wasn't even shocked. Nothing could surprise me anymore. This whole event seemed intelligent, coordinated, a calculated Armageddon by some god who thought it best to bring about the end of humanity. Emma wrapped her little arms around my neck again, as once again we were forced to tread water. The rain stopped, and the moonlight returned. Our neighbors were a lot older than we were. They didn't have the strength to tread for long, and one by one they all drowned or drifted away. The night was freezing, and there was whale song in the depths below us. I almost thought I could see their grey, massive bodies moving under us in the dull moonlight. Emma's grip around my neck slackened and released. Her pale skin had turned blue, and Jessica held her and wept, as hypothermia had set in much quicker on the 5-year-old. I had no words of comfort for her. I had no words at all. A ring of fire lighted the sky as satellites came crashing into Earth. Whatever had happened with the tectonic plates below had no doubt altered the Earth's center of mass. Some satellite parts landed burning in the ocean, but most didn't make it that far. I guess if anyone had been on a space station, they wouldn't be alive anymore either. Jessica looked weak. I could see in her eyes that she had given up on living. I whispered, "I love you," to her one last time before she slipped into her watery grave. And at last, I was alone, floating and shivering under the moon in the vast ocean. The warmth of my bed, sunken away kilometers below the surface, with so many whales and other sea life between me and it. I had a good life, I guess, I thought to myself as I lay on my back to float. An eddy was forming near me, which became a great whirlpool. I would have been so anxious if I had the strength, as I was sucked down in it. The water closed over my head, and I stopped spinning. I wasn't even trying to hold my breath. I just let the water fill my lungs. I wasn't so deep that I couldn't see, however. Pale moonbeams penetrated the space around me. I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by sperm whales. They oriented themselves vertically, clicking at me, as I had seen them do in documentaries so long ago. Yeah, that's right. We wondered if their language had been more sophisticated than ours. Had they been responsible for this? Who cares? I closed my eyes. Hey guys, thanks for listening to that depressing horror story. I thought that was a really neat concept and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, check out my book, Polyandry and Becoming the King of Hell. It's about a little boy who dies and then grows up in hell. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.